library.
Control territory. Started. Sharing the screen with you, so it's been.
I'm finally here and present. Do you want me to run it? I'm finally here and present. Do you want me to run it?
Yeah.
All right. Meetings called to order. So that's right there. Can we just go around and introduce ourselves since I've been out and there's some new faces? Okay. They're Joan.
Anyways, Tracy Keller. No. And Suzanne Ball.
Awesome.
Julie goes.
It's more.
Katrina Carter.
And Alan's gonna be appointed at the next select board meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Shoshana is running a few minutes late.
For the minutes from the last meeting.
They did that here. Yes, it said.
My share price.
Okay. You didn't send minutes out. Didn't? Oh, my apologies. Thank you.
We'll just hold that for next.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Public comment? All right. So then committee updates, additional committee members. So,
Yeah, so Alan Kimberly. Has submitted an application, and I believe the select board is gonna take it up next time they meet. We had a couple members, Heather, drop out since the last time you were in person, and Stellan's gonna take one of those spots. And we could probably use another one or two. And that would be it again, just for the size, so. Kate Chaplin had expressed some interest, but we never really heard back from her. And I don't know. Maybe somebody can want to we can.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
because we had Mike for.
Yep.
But then, yeah.
I know I did. I talked to Angie. Angie Del Vecchio.
she'd be great.
Yeah, she'll be here.
Yeah.
To Angie Del Vecchio or even Chris, but I don't think I'd have. Let's jump on. She's been ready.
Anyway, it's not a critical mass issue. It's just nice to have representation from everywhere. But fortunate.
Are we actively looking?
I don't know if we're like actively looking, but I'm saying for all of you. Put the word out, if you can think of people.
Aren't we a little ways into the process at this point, and there will be quite a bit of catching up to
I
do?
definitely don't think it would be too hard to catch, but we are ways into the process.
I think the town website states that there's 4 positions available.
Yeah, they have a new system. I don't know if you've seen it, where it lists like the number of seats for each committee and if there's a vacancy, and also kind of like a database driven.
Do we want to ask them to dial that back there too?
We could, yeah, I mean, I think that's okay. I don't think they're like actively advertising it.
Right.
But yeah, I've worked on other projects where someone has had to leave, the process takes a while and, personal life stuff and another person is brought on like, in the middle of it. Where is that in?
The survey update?
Yeah, so the survey's closed. Thank you to Kathy and Judy who were at the Memorial Day picnic.
Too much. Yeah.
That's okay.
We had fun.
Yeah,
That helps a lot.
I think we have to think of it as sort of like passive outreach, where it's just sort of like, even if someone just sees the poster or that this is a thing, it's lodged in their mind somewhere. Just another, point of contact. But yeah, survey's closed. We're just going through and looking at the responses that came in since the first time we reviewed them. It's looking pretty similar. Like a lot of the sentiment is fairly consistent. Yeah. I think we did get more, like younger respondents, younger families through some like targeted, like extra emails sent out to the school community and things like that. So,
We're in the school.
Really good.
yeah, 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 that's
Did
good.
you see?
That's really good.
Yeah. Did you notice?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's saying.
No, you don't have anybody in school, no. I was thinking, you're the only children who might be in school, but
Yeah.
not yet.
No.
Great, so, even though the survey's over, it's not the like last chance to get involved and like voice your opinion. So if you are out and talking to people, and as we'll go through the public outreach for the summer and then kind of talking about the public meeting coming up. But people can still certainly like, reach out through the comp plan at Mountain Desert email or through you all if they have like just sometimes people just have thoughts and they want to get them down in an email and send them out. We can always collect information like that as well.
So what's the plan with the results? You're still tallying them, right? And
Yeah.
What will you do with that?
Yeah, so the first time we looked at them, do you remember how we had kind of summarized them into some slides? With some of them are easily put into pie charts to talk about percentages, but we create essentially like a survey summary document that'll be kind of like an appendix, an attachment to the comp plan as part of that. And then when we do have our public meeting, there will be a portion of it in the beginning, which is like, here's what we heard so far from the community. Yeah, so there'll be sort of like a summarized informal report, essentially, of this is what the survey brought to light. And then when we do the public meeting, it is a great chance to hear from people too, like, does this resonate with you? What do you think about this? And I think a lot of people will say, I didn't even know there was a survey. But actually, yeah, that does. Like, I feel that way too, or I feel differently. And so it's just another great way to get more input.
I would also add that it will can inform our discussions here. So it'll be interesting. And then if there's some themes that come out of that, like, 100% of the people decided that they wanted to be just like it was in the 1950s or whatever. So we want to deep dive into that sentiment a little bit more. Like, why is that? What are the things about the 1950s that everybody loves that we want to try to think about? Or,
All the
how do we
going.
advantage the sentiment of the 1950s with the modern day changes? There's a lot of things that can come out of that description. So I think not only will it be informative for public, but also for your students. I'd say the summary will be developed, Susan said, and then we can use that in a lot of ways.
Any other questions about that? How do I like with the Zoom toolbar? It always blocks the. Yeah. Like after all these years, right? I know it's this one.
Are we still rotating the note taking?
Yes,
Okay, I realized that I didn't
that's okay. Right.
ask someone to take notes. Is anybody interested in taking notes?
You already in it and
Some of the stuff's easy. I was just thinking maybe during our comment section, it might need some information. Like,
Actually, also, when I was taking notes, it's also being recorded, so you can.
yeah. Betty likes to, I think.
Thank you. Next thing we're gonna talk about is just looking at the summer, where are there more of these sort of opportunities for primarily that passive outreach, but maybe actually some more directed outreach as well. So this is a list that we had made together and revisited a few times, and then we've been adding to it as well. But so we have the Memorial Day Parade and Lunch. Thank you again for being there. Did anyone talk to you at all? Did they actually like actively do one of these?
No. I brought down the sign and I checked in with, I brought it down to the, the green and checked in with Anne Marie
Mhm.
because they're running that whole show.
Yeah.
and asked her about that. And we've done it so many times at the lunches, the community cafe lunches. We brought it there and I put down flyers on different seats and did that several times. So she's like, yeah, you can't get rid of this complaint. Can you?" Oh, no, sorry about it. But we decided that we put the sign over by where people were collecting drinks and stuff. So I had, it was also a windy day, but I brought down the, you know, what do you call those things? An easel to lay it on, but that wasn't gonna work because it was too windy. But we sort of positioned it there right behind where people go back for ice cream and drinks. And so, but nobody commented or asked me anything about it, so.
That's fine, yeah, that's great. It had other things on
Yeah.
hot dogs. Yeah.
But even if it just registered, like, oh, that's a thing that's happening, that's good. Noel, you've corresponded with Tracy Averman about
Is
the summer
is
residence.
she still the secretary?
Well, as far as I know, she said there was a board meeting coming up or something that, I don't know what date, I can't remember the date she said it there. She thought it was a good idea, a great idea to be on the Summer Residents Association meeting that she was gonna get back to me on dates. So I'm still waiting to hear back and I'll check next week probably.
I think that is one where like Noel and I would go and represent the committee in that case and perhaps do more of like a formal presentation.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. Whereas some of these other ones I think can be more sort of that like informal passive outreach. Great. The card table, what did you want to add to that?
No, I just think the premise here is that we had a brainstorming list with everybody about, these are some opportunities for outreach. And I think that the bigger question is there are a handful or less of those ones that would be really probably best to use our time for as your consultants. And then there are many other opportunities where it would be best to use your time. And I think the big thing, but where do you play into some of these other opportunities and really would be best to use our time. So, I mean, as Suzanne said, I think that some residents association meetings seem to be better for our time. And again, it's not a question of who's better to go with what, but more of a, where would you like to spend the town's resources? Because we're getting paid to do these meetings.
I think the same is true of the Seal Harbor BIS meeting.
And when is that?
We don't know, but I mean, that's one of the other things. Yeah. I think
But that one is more like.
more of a closed meeting.
Yeah.
They would have an agenda.
And I think the message we want to get around at any of those events or locations like Beach Hill Farm is come to this event, this public meeting, this gathering, et cetera, right? Means not about a survey any longer but here's where you can find out more about it, right?
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of it right now is that we haven't set a formal date for like the early fall, late summer meeting that we're gonna have. That's the public meeting, which will be pretty much advertised for. But it is, we're doing a comprehensive plan town. Go here to find more information, feedback, stay and so get more about. Some
Yeah.
information.
Right, and as we get further through this process of like talking about these different chapters and having drafts that we feel are, complete drafts, we will begin to put them up on the website, the project website, and so people can start to see the materials as well. Yeah.
So some of it might be like if you go to the Silver Maine Chamber of Commerce events, just that making sure that the poster is there, the flyers are there. So people know, hey, you guys are, oh yeah, they could be doing that, maybe I should be checking.
Well, we probably should spend a lot of time doing that until we actually have something for them to check out. So if we don't have that stuff up online yet for them to go in. It's good.
But I still think that there's stuff that's constantly gonna be kind of uploaded there.
Right.
Once
We get to that. Yeah.
Like happening, and what we noticed with the Memorial Day one was there's an opportunity that everybody thought, hey, this is an interesting opportunity to get the word out and doing a content. And it was like 2 days before, I think we reached out and said, who can go to this?
Right.
But those are we just have to maybe prepare to be present somehow at those events. That's all.
So
Even if there's,
do we want to, because the next one's July, but I know that'll be our next meeting, but do we want to take this and, because we can access this from the drive, correct?
This, yep, this is shared with everybody and you're all,
Did you have people just reach out to you directly to say, hey, I'm interested in doing, the Somerville Library or something like that?
great.
Um,
Yeah.
Versus using like this time here to select that, because we have a pretty hearty
Yeah,
meeting.
for sure.
Should we also offer to have members of the committee? You guys, do a brief interview with like the Islander and with Carrie Jones of the Bar Harbor Story, and then they could write a piece about.
I think the Bar Harbor Story definitely wrote about it as starting. Several months.
But at some point, we guys,
Absolutely, I think that'll be in around the time of that public event or you after.
Sure.
I mean, they might be there.
Yep.
You did a good job. Okay, great. I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce. I CC'd you on there, Heather.
Yeah.
Great. And then, we talked about hanging a fire at Beach Hill Farm. I don't know about school events over the summer.
no, they
Right. And then we're gonna reach out to Rainey as well. I have talked to Amy Weishart at the library about doing sort of like an open house also around, the summertime, so we'll take the lead on that and, follow up there. That could be just like a great informal opportunity to learn more as well. Any other thoughts?
Well, I think we need to we need to have some information to share, in any of those events, and I don't feel like we're at that point yet.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, there was a charge to get people to do the survey. Now we need to figure out, are we making new goals? Are we changing ordinances to meet those goals? I mean, what are we doing? Because that's when people are gonna get engaged in things.
So, I noticed that you brought like an older version of the slides that had the timeline on it. Yeah, so, I mean, part of like where we are gonna get to that point for sure. But what we're gonna initially share with people is like these key findings and then what the survey says. Yeah, so we're in this process of like trying to get through these inventory chapters to have a complete set of key findings to share.
You mean when we do a public meeting?
Yes.
That's fine for a public meeting. But I think we're doing ourselves a disservice and the town a disservice if we don't, at some point, as a committee, decide what we want to suggest. Doesn't mean people have to accept it. But we know what the outcome is going to be. Everybody's going to say, I don't want anything to change and I want to deal with affordability. So you've got this.
Can't have it both ways.
All right, right. So if we're serious about, because that was the same thing as last time, and nothing really much has happened, like on affordability. We haven't really bent any curves on that. So shouldn't we be trying to come up with specific ideas? Some of them quite challenging, but perhaps important, and about what we could do. Like what can we do about the zoning ordinance? What can we do about fees? What can we do about this? What can we do about prioritizing favoring year-round businesses as opposed, what could we do to help actually bend this curve? Now, people may not like any of those things, but if we're not just gonna go through this and come up with, oh, we need to do something about affordability, but I don't want anything to change, then I don't know, what are we doing? What? So I want to try to stimulate at some point thinking about what we could possibly do.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that, it seems to me like we could be in a position if we dig into this enough and we ask those questions, well, what could we do about land use districts? Or what could we do about sizes of property lots or, the density issues? Put those on the table and see if anybody actually what people are willing to entertain doing.
Um,
I don't know where the process would. do.
yeah, typically, I mean, so there's a lot of different ways to do it, so it's great to be creative about it. Typically, like, we come to the community first with like, here's what we heard in the survey, here's what sort of the data is telling us. Where does that land with you? What are you concerned about? Additionally, it's sort of like a, it's not just a checking a box public meeting, but it's sort of like, this is a checkpoint, a check-in. And then the committee then takes all of that and all of this material and then starts to develop those ideas. Like, here are the action items, here are the goals and the actions that we want to take. And then you go back to the public and say, here are these ideas that we've come up with. And that's where the public starts to really pay attention, right? Because they're like, wait a second,
Mhm.
Yeah.
they're gonna do what?
Right.
And so this is like, in the typical process, we're just like not quite there yet because the committee hasn't done that work yet.
Sure.
But
I would say that as frustrating as it's gonna be, like, you have to set a foundation first.
Yeah.
And that the vision value stuff that we've talked about in our timeline, which is the next public meeting that we're gonna have,
Mhm.
that's the question, that's where we start the question. And in order to, as representatives of the town, we're gonna have a meeting that basically says, here's where we are. I know some of you already have a good sense of this, but the data is just, let's just use housing as an example, because everybody's talking about that. So, and we all have a good sense of where housing is, but this is what the numbers are actually saying that housing is. I can tell you also from experience that it doesn't hurt to continue to reiterate, this is what the numbers say about
Yes.
housing. And so we're actually building that foundation and common understanding. And then at the same meeting, we're gonna say, all right, our next charge is to develop some understanding of what the community wants for their future vision.
Mhm.
And then, once we understand that as a group, it's your job to do exactly what you're saying, which is to kind of say, okay, if you said you wanted to do this, this, and this, then these are the things that we need to do. Now let's talk about it. So we have to like move to that point.
Sure. Sure.
And so when we're talking about outreach now, it is still, as frustrating as it is, it's the tenacity to be able to go out there and just say, hey, we're working on the comp plan.
Mhm.
And to not jump ahead to the next step of the comp plan, and that we still need people to know that we're actually doing a comp plan
that's the
for the
point.
whole time,
Yeah.
from like today until the end. We can't stop telling them that we're doing a comp plan.
Right.
So when we say passively out there telling people what we're doing, it is literally very passive at this point.
Right.
And then when we get sort of into the meat of what you're working on,
Mhm.
that's when people are gonna be like, hey, did I just hear them say we're gonna do this, this, and this? Holy crap, we better go to that meeting.
Right.
But even up until that point, we need to reach out to the community and get as many voices as we can to participate in that sort of vision values discussion, because that vision values discussion is what needs to do that a lot of stuff. Like, if we all think that the vision values is one thing, but we're having a public meeting and they're saying something totally different, then there's a lot of disconnects happening. We need to figure out what that is.
It's also meant to be like the overarching kind of guiding principles for the goals and action ideas that you do come up with.
Yeah, so I, as a person who wants to kind of dive into the solutions, first, I completely get what you're saying.
Mhm.
But I think we're like, always get into the situation, so we're like, I'm just holding you back just for a little bit
Yeah.
longer, and then we're gonna go for it.
I totally respect that, but what I really do like is your statement that when we have that public meeting, it ought to be information dense.
Yeah,
And not to be just
no,
a feeling.
No,
no,
It ought to be-
that's,
there'll be some of that, but it'll be very structured.
In
Yeah,
fact, at that SRA meeting, you gotta have all that data right there.
Yep.
Yep.
That's what you need to show.
And so, like,
Exactly.
Because they're not listening to other people.
right, and what
Down here.
Suzanne's talking about with like, even with the library, is like more like at this phase, it would be more like an open house thing where we could either be there to answer questions or just we develop like infographic posters and just leave them in that back room for people to see, somewhere in the library for people to see, but it's more about like just kind of getting the word out, and that's, yes, at SRA meetings or the Seal Harbor meeting or whatever, like, it's the beginning part of this phase is gonna be very much like, did you know that the town market dirt X, Y, and Z? Did you know that ABC, and it's gonna be a lot of that. And then it's gonna be a lot of, here's the process, and then it's gonna be a lot of, let's try to understand what, they're thinking, because we need to kind of get the common themes of of some feedback from them, but we haven't got to this point yet of really designing the questions of facilitating the process, but yes, that's what it was gonna happen.
And I wonder if, when we're putting out that information, we could also include, here's what the comp plan from 2009 had as goals. Here's what we achieved.
We'll get that before we start.
I know, well, I understand we didn't do much, that's what I think. So, and so I think we have to be aware of that
Yep.
and take responsibility.
So- Let's break it into different sections of the development of the plan, but we've already, that's 100% what we're gonna do,
Yeah.
because there's no sense to reinvent the wheel on things that are still good.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times what we do is, I mean, it's a slog for you guys, but we have a document that's basically like, here's what the old plan said. Is that still good? We'll have to go through it.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna
Yeah.
add new stuff to it.
One
How do we
thing
refine this, do that?
that was talking about, Gail, when she said, like, people respond if there's a solution presented. I think it might be that we get more engagement at the meeting if options are presented to people and then they're interested in going to it because I said that we should just build a higher system, you know, they will show up.
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
Let me just, but let me pose this question, because the first question is gonna be solutions to what? Like, we don't all agree, or we don't know if we all agree on what we need solutions for. So the first part of the conversation is trying to find some understanding of what it is that, like, solutions to what?
But will they come in the door if they're just going to get,
Yeah.
you know?
But at that point, we can, I still think you need to go through, I mean, we'll do whatever you guys, however you guys want to, do it, but I still think you need to just pause. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
not pause, it's really just like it's a very methodical. And we're actually like expediting some of this data stuff because like people spend too much time, but we want to like get through it and then just say, this is what's happening here. And you can start to identify the problem, here are the issues that came from the data that we need to actually find solutions for. That's the phase we're in right now. So in order to find action items, we need to understand what we're trying to find action is.
So as we go through all the material, I can't help myself. I read it and I check on things. I'm like, I have other ideas. How do you want us to deal with that? Just,
Yeah, if it's like a typo or if it's
Yes.
like something like that, just send it to us directly.
Okay.
That's easy.
I have.
Great. If it's something really fundamental where like we need to talk about this as a committee, then this is the time where we talk about it. The idea is to, we don't want to spend since we meet monthly and there's like 10 required subject areas by the state, we can't spend multiple committee meetings like on a certain topic unless we have done it in the past with communities when it's like about housing or something that's just so like fundamental to, so send us things like that. But if there's something that we need to hash out about either like, why is this data set not included or what is, can we talk about this differently, or if it's, something really critical to how it's fundamentally presented, then let's absolutely talk about it.
Also, we've built sort of, as we've been evolving through these conversations, I think, or Suzanne and I sometimes say, well, let's put a kind of pin in that sentiment, but that's why we have a flip chart too. Because as we're writing things down, certainly ideas are popping up as part of the conversation. We don't need to lose those ideas now. We can record them and then get back to them as we're coming back to the topics. So what we're doing right now is even in this group is building the understanding of where we are as a community. And we're going to get back to each of these topic areas and talk about now that we understand where we are as a community, here's some of the things that we want to concern. Now this is what we need to start to do about it. These are the questions that we want to pose to the community about solutions for these particular things. So I don't want to lose, I'm not so rigid that you just like, we can't talk about any of your concerns, but I think we need to like move through a common understanding of the data. So there's gonna be a little bit of that as well,
I'm comfortable with your approach.
Great.
I just, I also think that when we get the gestalt from the community about where we're at, it does have to line up with the data. And if it doesn't line up with the data, then it's up to the responsibility of this committee to say, hey, I know you don't really want to do anything about lot size, but, or whatever, you know, whatever the issue is. I think that's where we have a leadership responsibility to try to make people make those things work together.
And I think that will be an interesting conversation. If the data is saying the community is trending one way and the community is saying, well, we don't really care. Like, that would be a great conversation in this group.
I know I've asked this you before, but what makes the town answerable to the comp plan? Are there any teeth in it? If they don't fulfill, does anybody get their pay docs? No.
So,
So, like, why would they follow anything that the community or this committee puts in a comp plan?
Because the town ultimately has to vote
Yeah.
Right.
on specific proposals. So if the town says we want to do something about building more affordable housing, but yet when the rubber meets the road, if the town doesn't vote for it at town meeting to change the zoning ordinance to do that, then we're kind of stuck. But I do think that what we should be focusing on as part of this is like an accountability section. It's like, how are we going to annually build in a review of where we're at and what we need to do next? I think that's would be an important piece.
The major component of it where there is like teeth is the future land use map. So the future land use map, when we get to that part, so right now we're just in the inventory sections talking about existing land use. But when we get to the goal setting and action setting side, we'll create a future land use map, which is sort of a conceptual way of talking about how land use does or does not change in the town. And that informs zoning changes. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
But if they don't do anything, nothing happens.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean,
Town doesn't do it, doesn't
To
vote.
boil it right down to the basics, that there's only very few things that, I mean, the comprehensive plan is fundamentally a land use guidance document, and an investment document for the community as it relates to land use. Fundamentally. So theoretically, it should guide, decisions about, where investments are made in sidewalks and sewer, water, infrastructure, minimum lot sizes, land use ordinances, all those things are foundation. The comp plan is the foundation for all those things.
And it's a state mandated document. It seems like if the town doesn't do something, you could take it to court. and say,
If-
Hey, this.
Yep, if you were to like, say we,
Well, if the
No one
voters
wants it.
decide to not do something, that's the voters, the will of the voters.
But if the plan is approved and nothing happens, that's the question.
Right. Yeah.
so the difference would be if somebody could come in and say, and I was just talking to a town about this, not too long ago, but they want to do this thing in a different area of town that's like currently in their future land use plan designated as like open space or woodlands or whatever it is. And they want to do more development. And the question would be like, if you decided to change your zoning to make it like a, 5,000 square foot minimum lot area, but the future land use plan says there should be open space, a recreational area, then somebody who doesn't like that project come in and sue the town and say this isn't for that provision of the rates is about for can't do. So there are underpinnings that can't. For other towns, not necessarily non-desert, but I think more and more grant opportunities are tied to having a good comp plan that's consistent with the Growth Management Act and other, regulatory things you have to deal with. But it's a policy document too. So it's really up to the policymakers of the town to
Right.
follow through with the plan.
And also, I don't know actually about this committee, but in some towns, the comp plan committee is a standing committee. So you you serve in the committee for the, this project, you write this plan over the course of several years. Then you are essentially like an implementation committee as well. Sometimes create different committees to implement it because the comprehensive plan committee is like fried. We're done that. So, but when you do write those goals and actions, you're assigning responsibility, suggested responsibility and the time frame. And so, if things work as they're supposed to, then the people that they're assigned to, the committee is sort of checking in on the status of those items. And in reality, committees come up with a ton of policies, right? too many that are, you want to get them in there for, you know, get it down on paper, they're great ideas, but you really have to prioritize, and then you have to like hawkishly watch the ones that are the priority and be realistic.
Yeah, we're gonna want to spend a lot of time, like, we call it the implementation section, but it's really the accountability part, but like, here's what are the top priorities. And then here's how it's gonna get implemented over a period of time. And our challenge is gonna be to say, well, out of all these great ideas that we're gonna have in the comp plan, we need to pick some that we know we can achieve in a period of time, you know, short-term goal or medium-term, and everything else is just, you know, for keeping in books. And then if you have a good implementation committee, you can say, yeah, we do these, then we're gonna work on these other things.
This
But
could
it's
be
also
a good possibility of rolling this into the land use advisory committee and beefing that up and
Yep.
actually making.
That's
it more.
and that could
That's
be
a
a
great
recommendation.
recommendation.
And all of the various committees, you know, the harbor committee has stuff on marine and the economic development committee has stuff on that, so.
Absolutely. It all ties together. It's aspirational, but it also shouldn't be like, we're not gonna suggest things that the harbor committee is, you know, kind of working on that, like totally out of the blue. Like our job is to kind of understand our job, is to understand all these things that are going on and put them in the appropriate kind of context. So it supports some ongoing initiatives, or also challenges some initiatives that really should be challenged, or things that actually should be happening that aren't happening, whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to do a time check, it's 5:40. This is all really important conversations, so I don't necessarily want to shortchange it because we only meet monthly, like, you know, it takes time to kind of wrap our heads back around the process and where we are. But do people feel like comfortable moving into the these sections?
Can I add one?
Absolutely. Sorry, and come to the table if you would like.
Okay, back there. I can see better. It's okay. I'm sorry, I'm gonna turn around, but I guess to me, this whole, I appreciate this very much. I have this like worry, you know, like that something gets, there's a thorough process, good thinking, good data, and then it's kind of like sat on the shelf. And I think everybody shares concerns, and people in the public, I think to me, all of this informs thinking about then like, we're following these processes for a reason and we're committed to them. But then there may be, like, we're asking questions that other people probably have similar questions or reservations or have no reason, you know, give it any energy towards even asking those questions because it's not relevant, it doesn't feel relevant. So even in just that like recurring promotion of the comp plan happening, it feels like there's maybe like it's ones, I'm not looking at the materials that we've already been. But there's something that needs to be, and also in the meetings that we offer, these moments, like connection. There's something that needs to be saying, like, this is relevant to you, how, this is where you engage in this moment, whether or not you're being asked to engage now. And this is how this plays out, like, this is like, there's something really like just direct, like, this is how it has an impact, but I feel like we should figure out how to be like really transparent, if we want that engagement and if we want the long-term buy-in. Outcome.
You think that message changes depending on what the outreach is that we're trying to get?
Can you, like, what? Which
So
are,
I'm thinking, the phase that we're in right now, if we just call it like, just the awareness phase.
I think
Come
so.
up with a hook,
Yeah.
and then if we're doing a public meeting that's asking for feedback on a certain thing, there's maybe another hook, and then if we're moving into, let's talk policy and action, then there's another.
yeah, I think it's just like really trying to imagine, like, a lot of people don't care, but why should they?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're trying to do here and then in market.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, you want to move into our.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Don't you? Before they,
Okay,
do you wanna be, you wanna have the chart?
You're gonna-
Wanna take notes, here to stand.
so, tonight we're gonna talk about the marine resources section, transportation, and, existing land use.
Before we quick jump into that, we didn't set a date for the public meeting. Is that necessary to do now?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
yeah, please. I think that
They
it
were
should be
fine.
like, oh, those are just,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, well, I'm
Keep me
thinking
informed.
like, yeah, August and into September. You're welcome.
Okay.
Um,
So I might just follow what's on the agenda
Yeah.
until.
and
we-
it's kind of dependent on how much material we get through these meetings. So that's sort of our like aspirational.
Okay.
Little
Yep.
target. Great. So we're gonna talk about the marine resources section, and, I know Kathy, you said you had gone through the inventory chapter itself or the slides.
No, that's what I'm a little confused about. The formatting between something like this,
Mhm.
say it's in Marine, and this.
Yeah, so
How are we using these
Yeah.
differently?
these are the chapters that will be in the plan in the inventory section. This is like the appendix, the data appendices. And the key findings are sort of the way that people,
These are the key findings.
they're just repeated in this format for the purpose of this meeting. That make
So
it,
this is just for us.
it's just for us right now. And then we're done with all of our chapters. We can create sort of a booklet of slides of the key findings from each topic area. Does that make sense? Sort of like,
So right now, they're for internal use of this committee,
yeah,
but someday they may be put together at public events or something
Yep.
else.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And again, they come straight from the inventory chapters. So the two main pieces of the comp plan are these like data analysis appendices, and then the what are you gonna do about it part, which is the goals and the policies. And right now we're in that data part.
It just looks so nice and finished. I thought, well, how do these, which are horizontal format,
Yeah.
fit with these, which are vertical? format?
Yeah, so we made these as a way.
I bet they can do that.
And it's just a repeated info, because it's a synthesis.
Right, so we want you to see the chapter that ultimately is the full chapter, and then these are the highlights. Right, exactly, so that we can talk through these ideas more efficiently as a committee. Now, in an ideal world, everybody's got all the time, right? And everybody's at home reading these chapters, with their red or blue pen and thinking about it very critically. We don't want to spend our committee time going word for word through these sometimes 20-page dense inventory documents. So this was our way of trying to like touch on the highlights. But we do rely on you to skim these and see if you think anything is missing or, does that make sense about the difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
And all of the graphics in here, where do you get all of these and how much control do you have over changing these things?
Yeah, so they come from a huge variety of sources. So these are coming from the department, this one on this page,
Yeah.
for example.
But you just picked it up from there and included it here, and would include it in the thing.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, if you mean like changing the heading or changing the,
I'm thinking, one of my
Legend.
questions on here was, this is hard to tell from that visual there. What it is we're looking at, is it this lighter blue area?
Yeah.
That is the shellfish area?
the shellfish
Sometimes
test.
it's just the colors.
Yeah.
That are,
So we,
No.
in some cases, like this is getting into the weeds on map making, but in some cases, the state makes these data layers available. And then we can edit the symbology, and in other cases, we can't. So it kind of depends. And in a dream world, this is an update, right? So we're not like starting from scratch or doing, but in a dream world, we would have like, all of the, everything looking, and we'll make it as consistent as possible. But sometimes with the beginning with habitat data, we need to use what the state provides. Like that's what they're looking for. And we can certainly go back to them and ask if there's ways to like make it more readable if you think it doesn't translate well. And I think that's good feedback to them.
yeah, and I just think in a lot of these instances, it's just the colors choices that people have made. It's like, these colors are way too close together, and I can't tell our town from this county.
Yeah.
I
You
would
know.
think the story maps are great, but sometimes it's better
You have outrageously different color.
No, yes, it's
all
just,
different.
sometimes happy, like Suzanne was saying, we could go in and say, we're gonna create a series of maps that are just gonna be like, here's our, our map reserve map, that's our template, and blah, blah, blah. Depends on what data is actually available for us to do that. But it's also like a lot of work. And so the priority has to be, what is your priority? And as a town, and we sometimes make a judgment call to say, this is important, but it's not that important, so we're gonna just use this map. And it's not a great map, and it's people that made the map that don't have a graphics background, and I can say from Suzanne is like a really good map maker, so we often have these conversations with people, why are these things awful? But there is a cost benefit analysis that has to be done at some point. How do we make these?
Short to make them.
Yeah, so the other thing I would add to this is that, what you're seeing right now isn't necessarily like the final product of the inventory sections. So we still have the opportunity to go back in and polish things up. But what's really, really important for now isn't that polishing it up, it's making sure that we have the data that is there. Are we interpreting the data the way you're interpreting the data? And are there other things that kind of jump out at you that we might have missed as we're looking through the data? Because that's the foundation that we're trying to build. And just so I want to just make sure everybody's kind of clear, because we could come back at the next meeting and just go through, here's the table of contents for a comprehensive plan. It's what your comprehensive is gonna look like from the table of contents, if that's helpful. And that document that we'll call it like summary slides is like a separate part. The comp plan is one thing. This is just a different tool that helps consolidate findings without having to go back through all the stuff, all the words. So it's what is most important? That's what's in there. That make sense?
Yep.
All right.
Great. So, why don't we start out by going through the sort of key finding points, and then if there are like specific, detailed like questions or comments that you found, Kathy, you wanted to raise, or anyone else, can jump into those. But, the first one is marine resources play a critical role in Mount Desert's economy. No surprise there. And, just the idea that Northeast Harbor Marina, Seal Harbor Dock provide critical infrastructure for both commercial and recreational marine activities.
Add Bartlett's Landing to that. Thank you.
Is there gonna be any way where we can talk about, is there any way to aggregate the whole economy of the town? So you look at $650,000, that sounds like a big deal, but is that 10% of the budget? Isn't it? I mean, so
Sure.
that creates a different sense of significance.
So Gail's talking about the next one. Commercial fishing and harvesting in the town of Mount Desert fluctuated over the last decade. We express that in terms of overall economy.
Getting is trend lines, maybe.
Anything else jump out there in terms of, sounds like Elvers do really well, and,
There's nobody.
yes, Phillips.
We thought was really interesting too is the shell fishing isn't really a big deal anymore because there's not a lot of places to go shell fishing, but yet, I mean, it's a concern.
We met with the Shellfish Committee as part of another project, but they said that like people just aren't really pulling licenses as much as they used to. There's less interest from like the young community.
Is that also for lobster? I mean, wasn't, I recently read an article.
I think it's interesting to think about how, let's just call it commercial fishing as a big picture really fits into the overall marine economy, and it's sometimes it's a lot bigger than others, but I would say in Mount Desert, it's not as big as other parts of the marine economy.
The question or the sentence, harvesting ended in 2017, likely due to harvesting restrictions. Do we actually not know that it was due to harvesting restrictions, or is it likely due to climate?
I think
That question, that sentence.
Sort of likely also.
what the map shows is that the main areas that would be for like climbing are closed because of pollution, basically. And that's part of what that we can validate. So I have to go back. Yeah, you go back. I think on the next slide there. So,
I guess we wouldn't know because the business decision the harvester made was it's too small of an area or it's too, like,
Or it's closed.
it's closed.
Also for some of these, they're moving further north too. So making a living at this is not sustainable.
correct.
Right.
So, and therefore, then it's not being passed down to the younger generations.
Right.
And then if you don't have an area or short of land
Mhm.
products, I mean, you might live in Mount Desert, but you might be landing your catch elsewhere.
Yep.
That's optional.
Any other thoughts on that one or questions? What?
I was just gonna say, to build on that point, as I was writing down, because we don't want to forget, but the question is, if we're seeing like fluctuations in the commercial fishing economy, and it is a part of the marine economy. Question for the comp plan, as we get into this, is what does that mean for the marine economy? And what do we do? How do we start to think about our changing marine economy, not just doesn't mean we, double down on yachting, or does it mean we think about new ways to support a changing commercial fishing industry? Ask questions, not answers, but just those are the kinds of things that always pop in my mind, like, how important is it to maintain existing access to the shore? Facilities that might have supported or access that might have supported shell fishing but don't today, but we don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Need to continue to provide better dock space because we're bringing in a different catch, but it's just things like that we have to start thinking about.
Or different kinds of boats. I mean, I'm just thinking that the marine resources is not just about fishing, but it's also about recreational boating, right? And what businesses do we have? Has that changed over time? Are we seeing more cruise ships, small tours around? I mean, that's a whole business that has grown up, right?
Yeah.
And or on the retail side, I think that, for instance, FT Brown's has changed what they're offering and it's going to change further because people aren't necessarily buying things there. So where do people who need rope or anchors or something else, where are they getting all of those things and how has the economy changed for that side of the business? And don't we have Haley's right here? What are they doing there? Yeah, I'm just thinking that there might be more to marine resources beyond fishing. What's the economic impact? And how is that changing?
Marine resources is a big thing. It's not only just like a habitat, which is great, but it's also, then there's the marine economy, which I classify as all the things that you're talking about.
Kind of, thinking back to the 2009 comprehensive plan, I read that a while ago. Seemed like there was a section on history and some of the challenges the town had been through before. Like, we logged the whole thing, we codfished the whole thing until it was extinct. We had dairy cows. Some of that history would be good to emphasize in sections like this, where like previously cod fishing was exploited. And we had to change our marine activities. Just to remind people that things are going to change again, so we can say we should put in more clamming infrastructure. You know, maybe that's a bygone era. Moving forward. Find the next shellfish.
There's a lot of sweet pops. Those to know.
Green crabs.
Yeah.
If we can find a way to use green crabs, that'd be great.
Well, there's, people are working on it.
Okay, great. That's all really great feedback. The next part is about scenic views. Access points, so thinking about marine resources in that section. We spent a little bit of time last meeting working on a map of that. Just the idea that, you know, these scenic resources and access points to the water do play a role in the economy.
I'd just like to change that one word tourism to activity. Okay, because it's not just for tourists. Everybody loves the views when you drive around, you know? So recreational activity in the town. I include people who live here rather than just here at nursing home.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay,
and I think Bartlett is Bartlett Landing, not Bartlett Island. And I wondered about including Gilpatrick Cove, which is beautiful. You do drive on South Shore Road. It would be beautiful. Okay. And we left off Ice Creek. Okay, should we include that as well? Yeah.
I gotta support Darlene's Water Creek initiative.
the next page, it talks about marine water quality is generally good. The Maine Department of Marine Resources monitoring of 18 water quality sites in Mount Desert indicates low contamination levels.
Geez, typo there, at most sites, contamination levels. Yeah, thanks.
Again, not to pause the floor here, but if you have a typo, just send us the typo.
Go ahead, Gil.
Yeah, I wonder what format, because I can like type changes on my version of this, but I don't dare.
Yeah, I mean, if there's like,
Do you want me to just text it, put it in an email?
yeah, that's fine.
Alright.
3 things that
Okay.
caught your mind, you can be like on page, the second page.
Yeah, okay.
Line 5.
I will do that. 'cause I need this.
Yeah. Great. And wastewater management varies across the town, with some areas relying on private septic and others supported by public sewer infrastructure. So any questions, issues, concerns about this?
Where's Hodgkin Cove?
And so isn't it over, down Pretty Marsh?
Oh, is it
You
in
know, like Jack Ledbetter's old house down there in
Right.
Seal Cove, but then if you were to go in towards the park area, or you go,
the town of Mount Desert?
I think part of it is in the town of Mount Desert. You can circle back on the roads, so I think part of it is.
Thank you.
And then the last point, climate change poses risks for Mount Desert marine resources. So, you know, the town has been working with Climate to Thrive. I'm not closely familiar with if it's been sort of like an analysis on marine resources per se. But I think it's important to include this piece here. This is one of these areas where like we could go into a lot of analysis in the comprehensive plan, but it could also be recommended in the goals and strategy, action item strategies section to say like, this is something that the town should study further through its own like standalone process. Does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't sound like we actually know what's going on with the town. I mean, it's not reflected in this text, what's actually going on in the town.
Yeah, I think so.
It's sort of like a,
We might want to tighten this statement up a little bit more, but it's really to target, this is pretty good. They're the facilities that support marine resources are one thing that could be threatened, and then there's habitat. And which by extension is partially economics based. So there's a few things we can to help with that, I think. We can tighten that up a little bit.
I think one of the things about the areas that's closed, my understanding is that Soms Harbor actually turns over its water very slowly.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why people need to be vigilant about that.
Yeah, I think the conclusion is that generally water quality in and around Montessori is pretty good, but there are areas where, shellfish in particular is exposed due to pollution. Some, in the older days, it was because there was a lot of people discharges and there's more and more, not as many of that as much of that as a problem. And then I think partially what you're saying, Gail, is like just sometimes by nature of there's a culvert there or runoff and it just doesn't flush out enough that those like.
I mean, one of the questions I have is about the assessment, just saying the water quality around here is pretty good. Do we need to take responsibility for knowing how that's actually being measured? Do we need to make sure that that's actually accurate? Like, you can say, all kinds of my health lab values are normal, but what's normal today would have been considered abnormal 25 years ago or 30 years ago. So I don't know what metrics they're using.
sure, part of our job is to collect the publicly available data and sort of report it out. So
Okay.
we have another staff member who wrote this chapter and like she would have gone and looked at in the part where it says 18 water quality sites indicate low contamination levels. So it is a generalization
Okay.
coming from the state.
Initial reaction to what you're saying would be it really depends on what you guys want to do as an action item. You really don't trust the data, or maybe in other situations, I would say, well, if the data is starting to come back to say, well, you have a real water quality problem, then they want to put some more action toward that. Okay, well, really need to understand, because these indicators from a high level are saying this is something we need to pay attention to. But right now, it's
It's not that I don't trust it. It's just like if he had to actually articulate it to anyone who asked, I'd be like, well, it's good.
No,
It's not going deeper than
the
this.
state tells us it's good.
Yeah.
But we can probably get some more data into not data, more, not the key finding, but the.
I'm not looking for little problems.
Yeah.
We got plenty. We got 99 problems.
So my
But-
question is, this is talking about marine water. I mean, I guess all water is marine water, but it's salt water that you're talking about,
Yeah.
not lake water.
Correct.
Does that need to be identified? Because this graphic has big pictures of ponds on it.
Yeah, that was in the natural resources section that we talked about last meeting,
Okay,
freshwater,
but I just,
freshwater
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
great.
So that is, in a different section.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Did arsenic come up in that other section?
Not, so that would have been like you mean like from hot water and stuff? I'll have to go back and check. I
I'd
don't
like
think.
if it didn't, if it's not a problem. Great, but I'd be interested in getting for
Yeah.
it's a checkpoint.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. Typically, I don't think we would have gone back and like tried to find out what are all the individual water tests results as much as like the park monitors water quality and all the lakes or people in, for fresh water, we're concerned with culverts, crossings and those kinds of things. I'll have to go back and. Yeah, good question.
I'm not, future development.
Yeah, what is it?
Radar.
I don't know.
Radar.
Yep.
PFAS.
Right. Okay, let's move into transportation. And again, this is not the last time to talk about.
Mhm.
As things continue to occur too, definitely. So the transportation section, generally looks at things like, what's sort of the transportation network composed of? What kinds of, transit opportunities are there? Are there any like, high crash locations? A lot of data just comes straight from the
Mhm.
State Department of Transportation. Where if there is any, where is there pedestrian infrastructure or cycling infrastructure, things like that. So findings we have here, the town is primarily a vehicle-oriented transportation network. Excuse me. There are some areas that face traffic congestion. Pedestrian infrastructure is strong in the village areas. But biking infrastructure is limited. So we had a conversation about, you can bike on any of the roads, right? But there aren't necessarily designated.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Oh, yeah,
I think you're right.
But there aren't necessarily designated bike lanes or bike infrastructure the way you might see in other areas. Do you have thoughts on that or?
Yeah, the role that the state plays in the major roads. I mean, Route 102 and Route 3 are state roads.
Yeah.
And we have to work carefully and over years to make changes. I think. So that's an issue, because I know there was a crowd of people, avid bicyclists, who wanted to have Peabody Drive, have a bike lane, wanted to expand it. I don't think anything ever happened, came of it.
Okay.
Are they getting ready to redo that road? Isn't that coming up? Peabody, isn't there something, because there's some concern about it falling, something. I remember being at a meeting.
Recently, there have been rock falls.
Right, but I think that's it's like it's almost from Askew is so, or they've got sections of it, but I thought, I was at a meeting, this was last year.
Well, it takes years. I mean, I
Yes.
went to a meeting about the Somerset Bridge at least 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
For what they're just starting.
Yes, yes,
So it takes a long time.
Yes,
So that's an impact on our
Yeah.
roads. If we want to improve them, we have to work with states. So that's something just to
Yeah.
acknowledge somehow.
Can you think of anyone that commutes on a bicycle?
Yeah, our tenant, Steve Anastasia, works for the park. He rides to bike. He bikes up to the headquarters all the time. Okay.
Does he do it all in roads? Does he go into the
He
park?
can go into the park when it's open. Yeah.
And there was another woman from Somerville that would travel to Giants too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Road started shit, nobody liked them there. No, can we go back to the other bullet for just 1 second?
Yeah.
The first bullet, so everybody agree that primarily, everything is vehicle oriented transportation network. And I think we're gonna get to this in the following bullet, so maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself. I was thinking about the congestion areas, but we're gonna identify, like, obviously the Soamesville Lake is like a key pinch point.
I have a question about that.
Pinch points, what?
Says with it says that's within shouting distance of my house. When you say that needs benefit from improved traffic management and safety enhancements, what'd you have in mind?
Yeah,
Because why should we, I mean, first of all, I think that, having built that turn lane a few years ago, that's made a huge
oh, it's
difference.
huge.
Oh, I've
Because
never
I
been here
live
since
over.
it's existed.
Oh, it
Bruh.
used to be, I'm going to the, every day, like the funeral home,
The back
every
is
day.
enormous.
Okay, it was horrible. That was a big move for the island.
The one going north to taking the right on Harbor Sound Drive.
Well, and you might not, you won't know this either, but that light was not always a functioning light.
Oh, yeah, it's been,
In the summer,
it's been in the summer, that's right,
I
yeah.
mean, it used to not
Turn off
Yeah,
in the winter.
Yeah.
yeah, so
That's
you
right.
go up to that corner from here over in Somerville, and you can go if there's no traffic, and now you have to sit there. If you're a law-abiding person.
Yeah, sometimes I forget. And then when you just got to go both ways and I go, I'm like, oh, it's wrecked, it's just in that old habit.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I remember my first year in Bar Harbor when the light at Mount Desert and Eden started flashing, I was like, that has been broken for so long.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to Noel's question though, do you agree that the town is primarily vehicle-oriented transportation?
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
I guess, but then going back to Gail's question.
Yeah. Let's stick to bullet three maybe.
Because I don't think making roads bigger is ever, I'm not a Robert Moses kind of person. I don't think making roads and making it bigger is ever a solution to anything.
No, you can definitely rephrase that. Fine.
Yes.
Well, things that, I briefly was involved with the community school and like they have students who live right along,
Yes.
in Somerville there that walk to school. And so they're
They had
very,
two.
yeah, really. What's that?
How many do they actually have?
That family?
There's one family like right down next.
Yeah, they have 2 kids.
So two kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's a good reminder, right? That there are people when the infrastructure is there, they have that desire to walk to school naturally. And they were really involved in that bridge reconstruction, the meetings.
Mhm.
So I don't know those plans in great detail, but I'm imagining that there will be a sidewalk, like a really clear, wider constructed sidewalk across, like up to the community school. Yeah,
I would think so.
yeah. So that could be a safety enhancement example. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that intersection aside from, sounds like the turn lane is a good development.
Yeah, I don't see how you're just gonna keep taking more land.
Mhm.
It is a lot better. It's like a lot better. than it
Yes,
used to be.
so especially in the summer.
And it could never be a traffic circle or.
No, it just shouldn't.
Probably not.
Oh, no.
Right. No.
No, no,
I think we do traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely not.
I mean, ideally, the southbound lane, but when you, on the other side of the intersection, we get 2 lanes, that's a little narrow. But they sort of did the best they could with what they had.
So the last couple of lines we could take out. So it just should, I mean, if it's a real finding, it would just be this summer experiences congestion during peak travel period.
Right.
During peak.
Can you just,
Yes.
can you just
Yes.
say,
It's peak. Morning, it's anytime like getting ready for school, it's.
can you just get rid of that? Can you just say the experiences, congestion period ended there, because congestion times are expanding.
Sure. I like that.
Yeah.
Fewer words. Great.
Well, again, I don't know how to plan it, because I do think, how long have people sat at that traffic light? Even in the summer?
What about the now when the RV tipped over?
Well, that was off island, I think, but
I think we're all smart enough.
when that happens, then that's not very gonna build.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just something you can alter.
Yeah.
We could propose ban.
So I would say that the finding is that it does get congested at that light. And the issue, if you look at Missouri's road transportation, this is the. It is the, if it is, there may be more, that's the question I have. It really is the key intersection in town. And it does experience congestion. Period.
What do you mean by- I'm serious that I don't know what you mean by that, because I, that's right next to my house, and that's always what I have to go through. I don't recall, since that road got changed, I do not recall having to sit in traffic, unless they're working on the roads and they're stopping people. I don't recall having to sit in traffic in, I really don't. I don't recall ever having to wait more than light stopped and then you go. I don't recall ever having to not get through the light on when it changes and then have to wait. I just don't recall it happening.
Sometimes in the summer at, 3:30, 4 PM, like if you're going up 198, so you're headed. You can really sit there because you have contractors leaving the island, you have, Jackson Lab, you have,
I get backed up to
people
the
visiting that have left.
Oh, it is that,
Somewhere.
that direction.
Yeah, I've been stuck at Mount Desert campground a few times and it's
Yeah,
slowly
beach
going by.
From that direction.
Yeah, from that direction.
Which again, I think
Eagle Lake Road even.
Yeah,
I agree with you that.
Yeah. But it's not as bad as it used to be,
What
no.
I'm suggesting is that it does, we're not, so this is the statement of fact.
Okay.
in many ways, like, is it a fact or not? You don't have to agree that we don't.
Right.
We're supposed to, that's
Okay.
why we're having this conversation. So. But I think the question of what to do about it might just be, it's like, we have to recognize that, and then maybe getting back to Suzanne's point. As an action item would be ensure that we work with MDOT to make sidewalks available. For, maintain the sidewalks that are currently a little bit, because there is walkability.
Because I think because of that bridge, you can't do a turning lane coming off from that road. You can't do a turning lane that's long enough to get.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would also say like Somersville, it's gonna be an interesting conversation, particularly that part of Somersville. If you think about, when we get to the future land use discussion. Because currently, that is one of the areas of town that is zoned for pretty dense development. So what's gonna happen there?
Right.
Doesn't mean it has to be, but it is. I'll jump
Well,
ahead a little bit, but
You
that's-
put, you put a water supply in for me, now we'll talk.
Yeah.
let's do it.
This point is transit services such as the Island Explorer and Downey Transportation play an important role and found that they're limited year round. But this is, part of the state asks you to reflect on what types of transit options do exist.
I really think public transportation on the island is not that great.
No, it's not.
I mean, see, and I have a daughter who can't drive, so it's like, wow, we're out here. It's not bad in the summer, but from say November to there's really,
Yeah.
And we begged them to, when they first started, please do it during the school year.
yeah.
So kids could use it.
something,
So that-
yeah, but it's,
And they just didn't have the drivers for it. It's-
And then when you have after school activities, the problem that the schools have in trying to get late buses.
Yeah,
It's just like
it's
such a
impossible.
massive headache.
so who has the buses that leave like and go to the lab and go to Hancock, Brewer?
That's down East
That's
Transportation.
down East Transportation.
But that's probably subsidized by the lake.
Yeah.
So I would. say, so do we need to rephrase this funding to be more? Sometimes also phraseology is more like, hey, let's highlight at least what's a little bit positive and then try to bring in the negative part. So it's not all like transportation runs year round, public transportation. It's gonna be like, hey, here's all.
And we're gonna keep it that way?
We do have some good things going for us. But
Yes,
it's really
yes.
to you.
Very limited.
But I also, not to like play devil's advocate in the phraseology, if you think this is like, just as an example, not necessarily this one, if you think there's like a really important point to make where you're like, I just know when we get into setting our goals and strategies, like we are gonna like go hardcore into the public transportation recommendation,
Mhm.
you can phrase it in a way where it's like more transit options are needed or something like that. And it's very direct and simple. And then the follow-up can be like this text here. So if that's something, just as an example, that you felt strongly about, it can be like because ultimately we're helping people connect the dots between like, here's the finding, and then it logically informs the goals and actions.
It could be, but more transit options, more year-round public transportation options are needed.
I also think that on the section about Cranberry Islands, I think that's an interesting possible conversation to have, like how much. What's the need of the Cranberry Islands and how much more of our town should be devoted to parking lots of Cranberry Islands? I mean, we have to figure out what works for, this is a focus on what works for the town of Mount Desert. And we also have to focus on the regional concerns, but should we actually have more parking lots? Like when I go out and try to do something around the elementary school and there's no parking spaces, like will you want to park in the Cranberry Island lot and get towed? It's like,
Because we're, I don't know, like, bringing this up, they don't own that lot, do they? They don't own that property, do they?
They rent
Yeah.
do they?
From the town.
from the Catholic Church.
Well, one field.
From the county.
Oh, no, up by the elementary school.
Yeah.
I thought, what's that?
This is town,
And then they park over here too, right?
but they have to get a permit. I mean, it's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need a permit for that one up there too?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Otherwise you.
Yeah.
one thing we don't talk a lot about in this is parking. And so in some communities we work with, it's like all about parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do a count of parking spaces.
But it is the biggest issue that comes up anytime anybody tries to do anything.
I think we need another key finding
Right,
about.
people
parking.
talk about wanting to put commercial stuff in Soamesville, excuse me?
Parents.
Yeah.
Underground.
Can
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
can I ask a question about the Northeast Drivers of Idaho and Police and Browns paragraph?
Yes.
Can you remove the word mainland, because we are not the mainland.
True, yeah, we're.
We may be bridge, but we are.
It's a geography stuff right there.
And Katrina and I talked about this in the past. We need a multi-level parking garage.
Oh, we've talked about it for
Like, yeah.
100 years.
Exactly.
Could I put
Yeah.
plug in that when we were redoing the marina, that we have had actually did a, like that goes a Google SketchUp version of the parking garage up there, and I cannot find it, but it was totally about, it was, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was so expensive.
Probably changes to two.
Exactly.
And there's also, there are ferry services, plural.
Sure.
So you said the parking garage option was too expensive, is that?
At the time, we couldn't get further into the conversation because everybody thought it was.
Oh,
I
thought
thought it was going to be decent.
They're the cheapest structures to build. They're gonna do their honey's.
And you could pay for it now too. You could pay for it now.
Yeah.
It would have been.
Not to have one spot
Yeah.
for one, my home in there.
Yeah.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
You know,
At the time.
like nothing
Oh,
else
I know.
out of this complex,
Yeah.
parking garage.
I don't know, but what about fire is down.
Sand Beach is tiered already.
Mm-hmm.
You could just do another deck, you just
Yeah.
ramp it out, you know, like.
Then you.
Well, that would be worth $50.
At Sand Beach.
Yes.
Not that much.
That's-
We could have been. It's crazy, we could have had a whole floor or whatever and then.
And wouldn't it like to have your cars in the winter undercover?
Covered, yeah, I think we've gone down that road and that, yes.
Well,
All right,
that's a good fight.
Right, let's talk about parking.
Yeah. I think the question was, we didn't have key parking as a key finding, but it sounds like it should be. So how we're gonna. Let's meet to that.
There are parking requirements for building any structures in town.
Not really.
Well,
Not really.
Well, yes, or no.
As they say, adequate parking shall be provided.
Yeah, and COA couldn't get an occupancy permit on that building for students until they had secured.
Adequate.
Off, right, no, they very specific.
When we approved the permit for Asticue, we went by the ordinance, but I don't think in any way, shape or form, there were enough parking spaces there.
Aren't today when
I was.
Right.
Definitely on the queue.
But,
If
but,
it's full
but
ever.
the- but the land use ordinance,
So it uses the word adequate, so that's.
well, no, yeah, but it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was like
Carry it.
one lot, one space for.
Well, are those little houses, can you pull up to those and park?
Well, yes, you can, but you know what?
To one car.
You limit it to one
A little
house,
house?
and that house can take at least two you know, like.
So the other vehicle has to park elsewhere.
Right, and so I asked all those questions, but there wasn't anything we could do about it,
Yeah, wow.
but.
So here's another. Thing to think, as we're thinking about parking as an issue, because it is becoming a deterrent to being able to do good things in town of East Harbor. Because there is a perceived parking issue. One of the things that we ought to think about is what is a good set of kind of solutions to that? And whether or not, like, have, you know, a lot of towns have, thou shalt provide X number of parking spaces per table, per square foot for different uses and whatnot. That would be a relevant factor, given the geography and just development of this area. And so is parking really a problem in that?
Yeah,
It is.
well, because we were
In-
able
in
to
the
park on
village.
Tracy
In the
Road,
summer.
and now there's signs all along there, no parking, no parking. So
Okay.
staff
Oh,
would
really?
often along there, and then this year, there's some no parking.
Is that a town road?
Is that?
All over town. Yeah, now there's no
They,
parking signs.
No,
I assumed they were. I don't know, yeah, I assume it was Todd.
But also the Seal Harbor Sand Beach is a problem when the Jordan Pond staff trucks in the Sand Beach parking lot.
Yep.
And when the contract was.
The contractors, yeah, that's.
Fell,
I fill it.
God, I didn't realize that. Jeez.
Who's the contractor on
Is the bus coming get them?
Any contractor that's up on the hill,
They're parking in the sand.
And they're gonna be there.
Yeah.
because if six guys drive to work in their pickup trucks,
Yeah.
there's no room at the property.
Yes.
Right.
So they're all
These are.
parking
things.
to the beach and carpooling to the property.
So what do they do, Jordan Pond? Does the bus go by? They can probably jump on the bus.
I mean, a lot of people that wanna hike in the far, now Seal Harbor, Jordan Pond Road, we put up a bunch of no parking signs.
Well, that was
People-
happening here too, when Bar Harbor went to paid parking. People were parking here, jumping on the bus to Bar Harbor. to
Yes.
paid park.
Yeah, they're willing to walk a mile to get to the Jordan Pond House to then go.
Or they can get on the bus, can't they? The bus goes
Yeah,
by there,
walking.
walking.
The Stanley Brook Road?
Well, yeah,
Hmm.
they'll either walk the
Hmm.
Seaside Trail down the beach or walk the
Yeah.
Jordan Pond Road to
Oh,
the
yeah.
farm,
Yeah.
almost in the village.
I mean, years ago, we used to park right by the gate to the pit and
Yes.
walk, go in there and walk. And then when the park put the rocks along the side of the road and drove, I said one day, I said, well, there goes our parking there. And my husband said, oh, people aren't gonna walk that far. And I said, next year.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it was
So now we
insane.
put up more
Yeah.
parking signs. I was like, why?
But they
aren't
have to
you
be
getting more
people-
spaces by the park?
Well, people
Go
are
and take
leaving their
their-
cars like at that intersection. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Well, I did see someone was saying they may start taking reservations for Jordan
Yeah.
Pond's house,
Yes.
for Beehive, Sand Beach, that area. I was like, oh, yeah. 'Cause it's-
Yeah.
Well, we're saying, because you can take the shuttle there, right?
Yep.
Well, we'll see how this new transportation center in Trenton.
Yeah.
I can't. I know, I'm kidding, if I was on vacation, yeah, anyway, no.
I know, exactly.
We're not forced to use it.
Yeah, I'd be driving the right spot.
And something like Venice, it's like, well, you park and get a
Yeah, but I don't.
bus.
But anyway.
That's a whole, we talked about Seal Harbor Beach, and areas in Seal Harbor. And we talked generally about sort of the role that parking minimums play in development.
It's the impact for retailers. We know that every business along Main Street complains about too many people parking there for too long, for one reason or another. It inhibits customers into their business. They-
Well, the other side of the point is that too many cars, in fact, impact the quality of life
Yes.
in these towns, where the cars parked everywhere. You know, you park as many cars in as you want to, so if you don't have the infrastructure to put cars, and you don't have a way of limiting, you can't do the development, and like, you know, I brought up Sundsville, there's talk, well, why can't we have a business here or there? There's no place to park,
No.
and you're not gonna widen that road, it's like a massively traveled road.
Yeah.
Look at the.
So you guys want to put meters on Main Street is what you're saying?
No.
Don't even give that,
That's what
yeah, don't even bring that up.
the public meeting will be advertised. that way.
He was here the last few summers.
Oh, I know Susan working
And
very well.
ticketing people.
Yeah.
Is it Southwest? Wasn't that brought up at a meeting or something for Southwest? I thought I read that like the Bar Harbor story or something.
That they're discussing.
Metered lot in Southwest, don't you?
Yeah, but that's a private lot.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's parking on this, there's like one side of the road.
Right.
Yeah.
any other spots?
Is it any,
Bartlett's
Yeah,
land
trailhead.
is pretty,
you know, it's, any trailhead is pretty congested on a good day.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking with the park, pretty soon.
The fleet
And
is
Maine Coast.
crowded.
Okay,
That's because they don't park in their parking lot.
Well, that's, yeah, we have plenty of parking at my, probably two, but not, I shouldn't say.
Just down to Long Pond,
yeah.
Yes,
but they're waiting for service.
full part of it, all
Long
these.
Pond,
So,
ahead of Long Pond, that's a problem.
Ponds End.
Ponds End, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a
Yes.
public access study with Maine Coast Heritage Trust too.
For that area.
I've definitely looked at, yeah, all of their, all the public access ways to water. So that's definitely on the radar.
So as a chapter section, do we say like parking is a resource? Like it's a limited resource that we have to share with community members, visitors, businesses.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And it has to be managed.
yeah,
Somehow it has to be managed.
It's a resource.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And it's a public, I mean, there's public parking, right? And so it's something the town is managing. I think in the inventory, it's, acknowledge that it's a challenge in these aspects in these places and then, tee up a key finding that kind of hits on that. Leads to some excellent work by the
I
committee.
suspect there's no data on the number of complaints filed.
Oh my God.
That's a really good question. We need to find out. We're trying to avoid
Yeah.
like counting the number of spaces.
Yeah.
You can recommend a parking study, right? Like in the comp plan, or if you think there's particular areas where there needs to be a parking.
Well, it matters how people park, they get little off, one person can throw off that whole little strip there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, we're 2 cars now, no
Yes,
car. It
yes,
depends on how they
yes.
park.
Yeah,
So like a little long pond may be a more efficient layout of the limited space that you have available would help with parking. But something like downtown Northeast Harbor might be a parking study that really starts to evaluate their public parking and how to best use public parking or expand public parking.
and then you're just gonna have to limit numbers. You're just gonna have to limit numbers. You can't infinitely increase seasonally the number of people who are just crowding in.
How do you limit that?
Yeah. Well, you have a limited number of spaces and that's it. And you can't do the overflow way along the edges of the road.
I get bubble. There's like what? 10
Well, so
spots,
that's
and you either get one at
Mm.
or not.
Yeah.
You get there.
And it's
Yeah.
frustrating. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
This area here is like the poster child for this. So if you know along each
Oh.
line, I know too. It is literally
And
like
there's a toddler wandering around.
all here, yes, people on bikes, people throwing open their doors, and people going
So-
60 miles an hour.
They are putting in that new
Yes.
lot, right?
Yes.
That's supposed, and then they're supposing on.
Oh, where's that
parking there?
Right there.
Back there.
But as long as there's signs, I guess. Yeah.
It's, so for Mount Desert's version of that, it's over at Acadia Mountain.
Okay, yes.
Right.
Well, that's that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that goes to.
Does anyone park there? I don't even.
That's awesome.
So they work with the park
Yeah.
to address parking on
Yeah.
park land.
Yeah.
So what are parking things that the town actually can do?
On the way to Otter Creek.
They did, that was laying the garbage.
I want to just go back to Kathy's example of the COA project, maybe. Kathy, you're thinking that like how parking.
They were not allowed to get an occupancy permit until they had entered into an agreement for off-site parking for X number of cars.
And it's their responsibility to just figure out where that's gonna be.
Yeah, they had to get, they had to go find a spot.
A locked spot or like a.
They rented, they entered into an agreement with the Catholic Church, with St. Ignatius. And for X number of spaces, during the school year.
But it's not enforced. That's the really scary part.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot park out front during the school. I mean,
So we get calls about it still.
oh, you did. Oh, okay.
But I think where this question in Northeast Harbor manifests itself is a similar thing. If somebody said, I want to do a business, it's Somersville, but like, if one of our goals is to provide multiple, or like encourage retail on the first floors and residential or office space on second floors in the village, then how do we deal with this perception that parking is a problem?
It's not a perception, it's not reality.
Is how do we deal with the reality that parking is a problem? That's what we're gonna have to.
Correct, yeah, correct, because we can't just pretend it's not a problem and we just let them build and let them do this stuff and then say, oh, traffic is stopped in one, too. So what I'm saying is, it's bad enough when you have like a blueberry festival.
Yeah.
Where
But yeah.
people are buying pies once a week. It's like, it's. really
Oh, I
hard to
love
get-
that. Yeah.
It's really hard to get.
I just say I'll put on like down. It's not a car accident. It's just a pie sale.
Right.
You know, because people are freaking out. We can't. I'm like, it's
Oh,
a
that's
pie
nice.
sale. It is not a car accident. Yeah.
Okay,
But they're,
Great.
do.
Yeah. Problem.
It's worth thinking through because one goal will not work without some solutions to the other.
Right.
God, it seems like you
So what's more?
ignored the marina.
great.
That is sort of it.
Well, livability, so you can't, and functionality. you can't just deny the reality of that problem and say, well, we'll just let people park on the sides of the road on 102 and some.
Yep.
You just can't. I mean, it just makes no sense at all.
Well, because I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
And
but the
or many
thing
other.
Too, that we're starting to see is not only are the vehicles getting bigger, but you've got the massive construction vehicles, and if you start doing that, then you limit it, you almost narrow it down to a one-lane road for some of the vehicles.
Right.
Yeah, oh, easy.
One lane road this week down by the fleet, and it's a
Yeah.
lane road this week and last week and next week by the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous right now. There's no flyer, there's nothing. It's super dangerous.
Yeah.
Great. And just the overall increase in visitors
Mhm.
and activity.
Bridge. I mean, a gate on the bridge.
So,
It may be quieter this year, I would just say,
Well-
it might be a little bit quieter this year with the world event, you know, so we'll
Yes.
see.
It hasn't looked like it so far.
I was in Bar Harbor today and I had a meeting and I came out and there were plenty of cars parked around, but there was nobody on the street. I was near
They're all
the
too hot.
I was like, did the apocalypse happen while I was in a meeting? It was really creepy.
I know, there were plenty of people. You just would have.
I must have come out and they are dead. I mean, we have lots of friends. I mean, they are, it is quieter.
Can we move on to
Let's
the
move on.
existing?
Yeah, so, we're gonna move on to existing land use. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so. I think having one phrase this, I personally like, you know, one of my, I think one of the most fascinating things about this town and this plan opportunity is really to think about how you have these villages, right? It's so unique. And so when we talk about existing land use here, I think that's sort of like a really big overarching element to emphasize. But so we have the villages map there front and center, and I think it's the second bullet point. But when we think about like discussing land use, just putting on our future hat for a second, like discussing land use in a town like this that is made up of these different villages that are very unique. I think it's just important to think about how like the things that ultimately decide will definitely impact each of these villages in different ways. So let's start with the second bullet point, just that the Northeast Harbor serves as the primary service hub, but and Mount Desert is defined by a network of distinct villages. I got the hand from Gail.
I don't think Northeast Harbor is, it's not my primary service hub.
Mhm.
I mean, no offense, but it isn't. I mean, it used to be much more than it is
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask that, because, I mean, so we were working on this, I was thinking,
The
well,
harbor is.
Northeast Harbor is supposed to be like county center, if you will, just because it's where the county office is.
Yeah.
Is it? So how do we want to so that's sort of the premise of this, but that was the question.
It is a municipal center, but the population has definitely shifted.
And it's also where the school is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a municipal.
Municipal
Yes.
services.
So how do we want to describe it? It's really a question, because it's a hard one when you get into what Suzanne was just talking about, which is like you have a bunch of these, villages around. Sometimes, if you're over in Pretty Bush, like Northeast Harbor.
Northeast Harbor serves the municipal center of the
Yeah.
town.
Mhm.
I was gonna say, Somersville, one stop, the bank and the post office.
Yeah.
That is a
That's my
big-
world.
I was gonna say, it's pretty much the same. We got it all right now, but it is a big, I mean, one stop, whatever it's called, that one stop, it can be. Packed. It could be packed. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
We've also got a medical facility and then we have.
In the-
Well,
yeah, the Kittredge building there and, yeah.
What's going on there?
You could say it is the municipal center and the largest commercial village
Yes.
of the town.
Yeah, yeah.
that's the only commercial.
You're only,
There's stuff in Seal Harbor.
Yeah, yeah.
I have your story ones than any other village.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're right.
I'm saying, Northeast Harbor's bigger. Has more. But I also wonder, if you look around the room here, you'll find that there are actually 8, because there's Sound and Beach Hill. So Sound Village
Mhm.
Yep.
and Where is it?
Mm.
Go Crossroads.
Beach Hill.
Let's go back to this.
Those are pretty ancient.
Yeah,
We're trying-
live there, actually,
But
like
we're
having
trying to
distinction.
get it notified.
Oh, yes, and you go to Tremont, it's like
What is Sound
Center.
Village?
Sound is down where the road curves.
Harbor or Sound Drive.
And all the way. Tracy, where do you live?
Oh, okay, okay.
Right on Giants Line.
You're
So
in
Sound
Village.
Village. Okay, all right. I've never heard it called, okay.
Yeah, no, it lost its
designation.
designation.
Okay.
Trying to get it back.
But it's one of the earliest villages that the Richards settled on there.
No, I didn't even pick up on that.
Right,
Okay.
sort of
So
in the old.
Yeah, it is.
Because you're in a.
Oh.
Church.
Kathy made a statement that Northeast Harbor is the largest commercial village.
Yes.
Right? But then Stephanie was saying, but I really go to Somersville.
Oh, no, it's Northeast Harbor is.
Oh, yeah. it's big.
No.
In the economy section, we were talking about things that are serving the local
Oh, the
versus
local
seasonal community, right?
I mean, I don't know you, but I don't buy groceries.
Well, no, I don't either, but it's packed. You know, it's busy.
Yeah, I've seen more of this.
You know, I buy groceries. Yeah,
People come from store buying,
yeah,
working here.
yeah.
Tourists.
High school kids.
The other thing, I don't think like the actual service area has to be defined by walkability,
Yeah.
but the Stonesville is really, you're popping in to get gas.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
across the street to
Right.
the bank.
Yes,
So it's, yes, it serves some of those immediate needs, but it's not a.
no, it's not.
Who still has businesses in the building across the street? Like Dr. Steve moved out. There's a computer. Yes, that's gonna be.
There's a new audiologist there.
Oh,
Okay, yeah. So there's the PT.
Yeah.
Physical therapy.
And physical.
Physical therapist.
Yes.
Yep.
yep.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Faith went for years and years. Yep.
That's great.
This is-
No, I don't know who owns it now.
It's for sale.
It's for sale. I don't.
Okay.
Florist is there, Florist.
That, no,
Yeah,
that's different.
next door, that's right.
Right,
Also
right.
intentional.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just think it's important to note, those are both those
Yeah.
kind of notes. Okay, and the first bullet is really just about, we have like a land cover, there's a national land cover map that you can
Mhm.
look at and you can summarize that, like how much of the land is undeveloped versus
Mm.
developed. And so it's the idea that this is a predominantly undeveloped landscape, obviously, because of the park and Garden Preserve. The third bullet down, new development in Mount Desert has been modest, but is dominated by renovations. And so, looking at like permits that have been pulled, most were pulled for renovations or decks or garages.
Did you ever mention the new permits that were pulled, 120 new permits? So you're saying more were pulled for renovations. Is it important to have that number in here as well?
Yeah, we have that in the data,
Okay.
but we could add some of that in. We're going back through and just double checking that as well. Because we have all the permit data, but it's how that certain permits were described, and we may want to may revisit how it's broken down. Because some of it would be like a new construction, could be something that was like a vacant lot that was then redeveloped, but then there's a lot of permits that were like, we tore down this house and rebuilt something totally new, so that's also kind of. new.
I mean, a renovation could be an $8 billion project.
So I think the conclusion there might be though that there may be a lot of renovation projects, which is like, could be an add-on, an addition, or
Tear down.
taking up like decks and things like that, but like a tear down and rebuild, or it could be adding a garage apartment or something like that, but there's not been as much like, there's a vacant lot that has been newly developed, and that is actually kind of an interesting fact.
And doing that next Thursday, having a groundbreaking.
That's right.
Yeah. Two new houses.
There are not that many, I mean, I don't know, I think 120 might be. So we have to go back and recapitalize some things, but the reality is that's like really interesting, because land is expensive or
And is there not a lot of land for sale, I guess, like?
not a lot of big subdivision. I mean, there's not like a lot of big subdivision projects
No,
before the
no.
planning board is passed. Well, there's a little difference.
New houses going up by your street.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Where's that?
Johnson.
Oh, that's right. Is that one?
Yeah.
Well, is it a garage?
I'm not sure.
Or-
There's a house and then there's like a Art museum.
Oh,
That's right.
Then on the other side, there's there's container buildings and those are houses. They're different houses.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that, we're talking about land use, we're talking about density, we're talking about building up more accessibility. If we've got centers like Northeast Harbor and some other places, and like infrastructure, like parking, that sort of thing is a huge problem. And we've got 80%. Well, there's a mistake in the description of this because, about that, in this section, Shelmsville. Well, first of all, some of the towns have sewer. No, they don't have sewer throughout the whole thing, so I should say some of that, and also Shelmsville doesn't have water.
Right.
So they're described as water and sewer, and that's not correct.
Mhm.
But I would say that this strongly suggests that we should be kicking the tires on how to grow the community also outside of these more concentrated areas. How to increase the density, how to increase activity outside of areas where we know we already have a problem parking cars and we already have a problem getting.
We're trying to do that with land use. Committee too, but subdivision, you know.
Yep.
But you also, that's the really tricky thing, is because you don't wanna cut down all the trees
No, no.
and get rid of all the natural lands.
Well, most of this 80% is park and preserve
Yeah.
anyway, so
Exactly.
it's not that, but you're not gonna, what do you, I mean, I never understood this, well, we're gonna make it really more dense in Northeast Harbor. I mean, are we really talking high rises?
I think there's an in-between of like, before you get to high.
No, I know.
Like, if you go through Bar Harbor, or as we call it, Bar Harlem, the little south street right there, it's super dense. That was all like families.
That's
that
right.
lived like in arm's length of each
Yes.
other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
And that was fine.
Yeah.
And Seal Harbor, you look at the two Dunbars and it's like the houses are
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And there was a school there.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so,
And it worked for a long
and
time.
it worked for a long time.
Right,
Um,
And now they're all.
and I wonder what the problem is.
yeah. But going to a park meeting I went to, they have a strategy to concentrate impact in specific places. So instead of encouraging people to go to different trails and do different things, they say everybody should go to Sand Beach, Thunderbolt, Jordan Pond, and then we can build wider trails in these three places. And we can do erosion prevention in these three places, and we don't have to deal with the entire park being trimmed.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's their strategy. So would you want to develop along 198 if you have to put in a new water line, a new sewer line, a new lane for cars? Or would you like to just have Northeast Harbor get bigger?
To get big, I mean,
Like,
there's not a lot of land left in North Beach. I
Well,
mean,
but remember, we can now have a second dwelling on, you know,
I do love it.
Yeah, but still, it's pretty.
And that may
squished.
increase actually.
Yeah.
The legislature was talking about making it even more dense. You know, you have to allow.
Yeah.
yes.
Greater density.
so it's one of those things, the unintended consequence of trying to spread people out is either we get sprawling subdivisions or we have to expand our utilities.
Yeah.
And traffic and parking. Like the Oak Hill Road, do we want more houses on the Oak Hill Road? Because coming out into Somersville at rush hour, it's never gonna work.
Yeah.
But
Can't
there's lots of
be
land
cliff.
there. There's 24 acres right up the road
Right,
there.
yeah,
Right.
Which is a
get
swamp.
them in and out,
But-
but yeah.
I
Right, it's a swamp. I know exactly, I looked
I-
at that land, I'm like,
I know.
what is this? And then Mark's like, I found it as a swamp.
But don't you end up exacerbating the haves and have-nots? If you're like jamming more people into smaller and smaller parts of the town and then letting everyone else continue to live on their estates where they don't see anybody else.
Some people
Um,
like jammed in living.
And some people like living where they don't see any
Right,
neighbors.
exactly. Yeah,
I don't think it breaks down that cleanly.
I think it's about having options, right?
Yes.
And fundamentally wanting to put people where there is infrastructure already in place.
But would you think anybody would ever suppose that we get to the point you're saying we can have X number of houses in the town? We're never gonna exceed this number.
No.
Nobody can ever
No.
do that.
No, I don't think so.
I think Gail, addressing your concern, so there's the potential to have a town of renters, right? If everybody's building multifamily units, then we're gonna have a whole bunch of renters who are not building equity.
Like else,
Or owners of like.
like Elspeth, if it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so
Season.
that's the thing, like, should we encourage condo or something where, or like smaller lot size, at
Lot
least you own your land, you own your building.
Right.
But smaller, instead of exacerbating the problem of there are people with acres, and then you have a shoebox that you're renting, and you're never.
You can house a lot more people in the smaller
Right.
area than like if you had an acre minimum, you have.
Well, the Heal project is an owner, but smaller, whatever.
Footprint.
Yeah,
I think I hope that will end up being a very interesting demonstration, because I think that's a proof of concept there. It would be good to see that, it's like, oh, this works, and then it would help.
Calm people down.
Yeah.
Calm them down.
The last, this bullet point is the zoning reflects rural coastal character, but may constrain new housing. The town's development regulations are rooted in the vision of small town coastal living. While this framework helps preserve community character, targeted updates may be needed to allow or encourage new housing options that support year-round residents and meet local workforce needs. So this is very much about housing, right? And this existing land use applies to all land uses in this chapter. So do people have any responses to that or want to add additional key findings or things that, like we talked about in the transportation section, like we need to talk about parking? What about here?
Can you remove the word workforce? Because what happens if someone wants to have a smaller, newer house, but doesn't want to live in housing at Maple Lane and wants to sell their bigger house and they're not gonna work?
Right, that was the issue was raised, so there were a lot of older people living in their houses that have 4 bedrooms, you know.
yeah.
Oh, that was,
That
Yes,
was
it
a
is.
question.
yeah, that
What
was.
type of people live there? They didn't think they could. And I was
We're
like,
gonna kick them out when they're no longer in work. That's right, that's right.
yes,
Stop.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, if you just remove the word workforce,
Yeah.
it's still
It
support
means-
year-round
Yeah.
residents and local needs. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have to say anything else about ordinances or findings related to those? Land use ordinances?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Do we talk about infrastructure in here? And
Like
water and sewer? Yeah.
Right. Also the public facilities section that,
Because I think that that's existing land use. If you're gonna develop certain areas, is the town, should the town be obliged to help? And the town is helping. I mean, we just voted in approval for River Road. So 9 more houses, we're gonna put in extension to the sewer line. So that's a huge commitment. Should we do that in other places as well? Should we make that long-term goal so that? Yeah, fewer septic systems and more sewer. Or actually, water is trouble cases.
You said this
Sign
is
it, are they gonna sign it?
I got listening. That's an uncommon note taking. I get listening.
No,
in
they're
case.
extending the
Right.
line.
Yeah.
Right, that was it's fun.
It's all.
Then I get listening and I forget to,
Say,
right.
there's gonna be-
No, I know. I'm just gonna be like, I went to
I
the
know,
meeting.
sound-
Yes, I
you
did.
you talked to them.
We talked about that by all.
Extension
Me,
of the line,
working and something, see, like,
Yeah.
it's hard. That was my, yeah.
You know, because.
Well, I think
Okay,
All right,
great.
it's almost 7 o'clock.
That was great.
So,
That's what I'm
We've
saying.
and Paul,
Well,
Didn't see it as well.
Then all of a sudden.
Yep.
Yeah.
oh yeah, I think the next one, the next meeting, we're really gonna dive into housing. That's probably the big meeting.
Yeah.
When are we gonna know?
The way it is tonight.
Still in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, lawyers all say sometimes, so.
Yeah. But at least you can start that up on, yeah, so that's a good move, that's a positive.